this, we're saving the best for last. And this is a panel of barrier breakers. This is a panel of superwomen. If we had the time to learn about what each of these women have done, you would just be amazed. But the superwoman pose completely works with this group, and so I'm really honored to have you guys here. So I want to just start by asking you to introduce yourselves. Can we start with you, Marla, briefly?
Hi, I'm happy to be here. I'm Marla Blow. I am a Senior Vice President at Mastercard in the Center for Inclusive Growth, where I run our social impact policy and work on all aspects of financial inclusion, economic inclusion, strategically across the United States and Canada for Mastercard. I come at this after having spent 5 years as an entrepreneur, where I built a credit card company offering credit to underserved consumers and sold that at the end of 2018. Before that, I helped start a government agency called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau with a then little-known person named Elizabeth Warren, now much more widely known. And before that, I was an executive at Capital One. So I've spent my career looking at these questions about financial inclusion and economic access from the lens of corporate, from the lens of regulation, from the lens of an entrepreneur, and now getting to look at it from the perspective of philanthropy. So really excited to be here, really excited to be in this fantastic partnership with the Aspen Institute. I should also add I am a fellow in the Aspen Institute, and I'm a member of the Aspen Global Leadership Network as well.
Thank you, Monika. Superwoman, right? I told you. Monika, please.
Thank you, Peggy. So my name is Monika Mantilla. I'm the managing partner with Small Business Community Capital. We're an SBIC impact private equity and private debt fund. And I'm also the CEO of Altura Capital. The work that we do is very simple. We help entrepreneurs to grow, and we provide them the capital and the strategic resources so they can achieve scale. I also have the great privilege and honor of working with a number of Hispanic organizations and diversity organizations. I chair the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Foundation. I'm in the board of the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative, and the board of the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. And all of these are wonderful organizations that are the ecosystem of people and organizations that really want to take the Hispanic community to the next level and integrate it and convert it into the mainstream conversation, not a segmented conversation, but a mainstream conversation. I've also had the great honor and privilege of being part of Aspen Latinos in Society, which has been a phenomenal program led by my friend here, Abigail Golden Vasquez, and it's a wonderful group of people that we've developed playbooks and a lot of things that are putting us into action and propelling us with wonderful ideas. So thank you to the Aspen Institute, and thank you to Prudential and your wonderful work. Congratulations on achieving the 1 billion mark, and to Lata and Ruben and Tony and everyone in the organization that is doing such phenomenal work. Thank you for your partnership.
Thank you, Monika. That's beautiful. Ulili, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ulili Onovakpuri. I'm a partner at Kapor Capital. We're a seed stage impact fund based in Oakland, California. Our thesis is to close gaps of access and our opportunity for low-income communities and our communities of color. And we primarily invest in tech companies in the early stage, so we're usually the first institutional capital in at the pre-seed stage or the seed stage. And we work with them in addition to funding their companies, but also to build inclusive teams. And I'm excited to be here, and it sounds like I need to become a part of the Aspen Institute, so let me know how to sign up for that. And since Prudential, you have all this money, we have 136 companies who are always looking for funding, so I want to put that out there as well.
Beautiful, thank you, Lily. Let me say that in reading about these three remarkable women, there was a common theme and a quote that actually each of them said, which is the same things. But first I want to tell you how unusual this group is. It's less than 3% of venture capital goes towards women-owned businesses, and less than 7% of venture capital funds are managed by women. And so you're looking at a group of fighters here who've been at it for quite some time. But in their writings, all of them talked about, and I want to ask you to jump right into this question. You talked about the problem of being in the diversity bucket, that you're over there on the side, you're doing the diversity work. What does that look like? What does that mean? And what are you doing to change it? Marla, you want to start?
Sure, yeah, happy to. So I guess the key way I think about that is there's a gigantic pie of capital that's available, and perhaps there's a slice of it available to all of diversity, theoretically, whatever that might mean, including women, like somehow women are a niche, right? And women's like 51% of the population, not a niche.
Did you all hear that? Women are not a niche, okay?
Women are not a niche. You could tweet that, right? Like it's not particularly profound, but true nonetheless. And the theory of deciding that I'm going to sort of join in to fight for the slice and fight for a little piece of the slice versus fighting for a gigantic pie where there's a ton of opportunity for capital to be awarded much larger than the slice, than any slice, no matter how that slice happens to be defined, makes it infinitely more difficult, in my estimation, to seek and successfully find that capital. And part of my real interest in being here is changing the way that capital is awarded in the pie. Not the size of the slice, not the existence of the slice. I'm happy for there to be a slice, I want that too. But what I really want is that the pie, the ingredients in that pie, the way that pie gets made, the way that the upstream feeds the downstream problems of who gets a chance to build businesses, who gets to make a decision about where to allocate capital, about the demands of the limited partners in that capital stack. Those are the things that will make it possible for us to participate in the pie, not to have a slightly larger slice allocated to all of diversity and all of women, which is just crazy.
Thank you, Marla. I appreciate that. Monika, what does that mean to you when you said you're often put in the diversity bucket?
You know, I find it as a big paradigm and a big dichotomy, because on the one side, there's this notion of, you know, the minorities or women being on the sidelines, having like a little program to satisfy a little need. But the reality is that there is a tsunami in the economy that points to the fact that minority communities, and very especially communities like the Hispanic community, are actually probably the biggest force of economic creation, of economic value, of economic development in this country. And so it's this big dichotomy. I always feel like we're riding in a tsunami, but we're one of the few seeing the tsunami, right? And so when I think about the value creation opportunity, like think about the 28 largest corporations in America in last year bought $84 billion from diverse businesses. So this isn't a little pie. This is a very significant pie of the economy. Now, they all want to grow that supply, diverse suppliers, by 20, 30, 50%. So this is a significant economic opportunity in our country that we take incredibly seriously, that our institutional investors take incredibly seriously, and we're just in that rhythm of aligning the right entrepreneurs with the right enterprises, with the corporations and their supplier chains, so that we can achieve a tremendous value creation. So it's this paradigm of feeling on the one side like disadvantaged programs, that I hate the name. When I remember I was providing services to U.S. Treasury, said, "Are you part of the disadvantaged program?" I said, "No, God forbid, I don't want to be there," right? and so this is mainstream. It's just that some of us are seeing it earlier than others.
This is mainstream, great. Ulili, what's your thought about that? Do you face that issue of the diversity bucket?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the time when people think of Kapor Capital, they're like, oh, Kapor Capital, they invest in Black people. Like, and yes, we do, and I think that is just a small portion of what we do. And because our portfolio doesn't look like a J. Crew catalog, and we look more like, you know, United Colors of Benetton, which everyone should, then I think the diversity becomes the thing that folks focus on, and they lose the impacts that our companies are having in the world. And I think they lose the fact that we are actually tapping markets, and we're tapping trends and trend setters. I mean, if you look at underrepresented folks who are traditionally underrepresented in tech, those are the folks who are trendsetters, who are the main consumers and trendsetters on social media. Like, those are people of color. You know, minorities are not minorities anymore. Like, you know, Latinx population in California, they've now officially become the majority. So it's really that we see that opportunity and we see the gap in terms of who's had access to tech, and we see that as a means for economic growth and economic creation.
Can I make a quick comment on the, like, because there's the contrast. I was thinking about 4.6 million Hispanic business owners, yet only 3% have more than 1 million in revenue. So we are in presence of significant disparities, but I think at the top of the pyramid, there's very important mechanisms that are changing and can have the ability to change our community, but certainly big disparities continue to exist.
So each of you has been on the cusp of some really breakthrough work around this question of what does that really look like to create new products and to address this question of having diversity work or inclusion work mainstreamed. What are you most excited about right now? So what's one thing Marla, there's a lot you've done, creating the FS card, which is really about income smoothing for low-income people. Each of you have done remarkable things already. What are you most excited about right now?
So I guess I'm really enthusiastic about the possibility that this conversation, that some of the conversations that preceded this one, turns into a movement, right? That there is real change, that there is, in the same way that it took repeated conversation, repeated engagement, repeated, unfortunately, natural disasters, right, for people to engage on the environment and really make that a part of a very large conversation nationwide. I'm hopeful that this turns into a conversation as well, and that we take this from here and leave this room and leave this facility and go out and get others engaged in this conversation and really make some foundational change in what we see. I'm especially excited to hear people talking about the importance of place, and we just had an entire panel about it. I thought Stephen's remarks about the East Side as a paradigm was phenomenal, and I think that tactical description to illustrate the principle is something that very much resonates for me, and that people are starting to recognize some of the challenges around things like gentrification, where the people that have been in place for long periods of time, in some cases generations, not getting to participate in the economic growth and the economic revitalization of their neighborhoods, and starting to see how problematic that is. I'm really encouraged by that. I'll use one quick example here in DC. So for folks from DC, you might recognize this. There's an area in DC where there was a cell phone store that used to blast this music called go-go music. So if you're not from DC, you might not know about go-go music, but it's a thing. Look it up.
Big deal in this town.
It's a big deal in this town, exactly. And as that neighborhood has been in a condition that required some investment, I'd say, safely, for probably 30 years, maybe 40 or 50, depending on when you start the clock. Now that neighborhood has started to improve and white people have started to move in, there was a movement to make them turn off this music. That is not inclusion. If you have to change how you live, how you've been living in the place where you have lived, potentially for generations, that is a problem. And the nice thing I saw, the thing that gave me hope, is that it did not work. So the community rallied around it. They brought in lots of, I believe even the mayor got involved. I can't remember, but it became a really interesting sort of nexus here in DC about how are we going to live together, right? How can we get communities to grow and change and embrace difference and allow space for that at the table? Seeing the conversation, seeing the struggle come out the way that it did, gives me a little bit of hope, and that's an illustration of the bigger principle about that conversation is actually changing a little bit on the margin.
So that music's still playing.
That
What's
music
the
is still
street- what's
playing.
the street
Love it or not, it's still
Do
playing.
you know the streets? We're going to tell people in case they
It's
want
on
to get
Florida,
out of the
Florida
rarefied
Avenue,
Willard.
Florida and 7th, something like that.
7th, right, just
Yeah,
saying.
somewhere around that,
There's
yeah.
music out there beyond the Willard. Okay. Lily, let me just ask you, what are you most excited about right now that's addressing this question of mainstreaming inclusion in a real way?
Yeah, so I would say two things if I can have two. We at Kapor Capital, we just released our impact report. We released it last year. which basically all of our haters who told us like you can't do impact and make money, when we made that switch, because we started off as a traditional firm, then we switched to impact in 2011. That report basically proved everyone wrong who has told us that for years. And you should look it up, www.kaporcapital.com, impact report. And just really, seeing the tie between the difference that our companies have made in the world and also their financial progress. The other thing is really seeing our founders commitment, which is an initiative that was created by the founders of our portfolio company to help build more diverse teams. And so seeing the success of that initiative, where we have worked alongside our portfolio and their staff to help build more inclusive ecosystems, and did everything from helping them hire to helping them onboard, and how do you maintain your workforce and make sure that they're happy, and really starting to see their numbers shift in terms of like you had environments before where startups had no one who was underrepresented typically on their team, and now they're going, and if you look at the change that they've made and the business opportunities that they've had, and business opportunities that they've gained access to as a result of that. Like for instance, one of our healthcare companies said, we initially lost a $10 million contract because we had no one on our team who spoke Spanish. And so now, they actually were able to go back and bid for the contract, got that contract along with other ones because of the diversity of their team. So really seeing that financial difference that inclusion makes kind of helps us feel like, yeah, we were right all along, and now it's being realized.
That's great. No, thank you for that. Monika, what about you? What are you most excited about in this?
So we currently run a fund of 147 million where we invest in small businesses, right, of $1 million plus EBITDA. And I think that what excites me the most is repeating what is repeatable from the winning stories we've had. How do we create an efficient ecosystem of entrepreneurs, giving them the right resources, not only capital, but shepherding, right, in the different areas where they might need support, whether it's people or marketing or access to corporate America, and creating an ecosystem that is efficient as it's been, for example, in the middle market. But so we're bringing efficiencies that haven't existed in our communities, in our types of businesses, and creating an ecosystem of value creation that is just a more repeatable process. And I'm very excited about that. We created, with the $1 Billion Roundtable, an initiative called the Triad Initiative, where we're actually aligning corporate supplier diversity needs. What goods and services do they need today, and very especially tomorrow? What type of minority and diverse entrepreneurs can provide those services? And then what is the right capital, funds like ours that are enabling and putting together these pieces so that there could be significant growth in diverse businesses. So I'm very excited about how that began being more of a Michelangelo type of work with each one of them that took a lot of time, then can be turned into a more systematic approach, bringing executive operating partners, bringing corporations to the table in a more systematic way. And I'm very excited about that future.
That's great. So we started the day, remember this morning, Wes Morris started by talking about the disconnect, and the disconnect between this idea that the economy was so strong and the reality for so many people. And I want to ask each of you the emperor has no clothes questions. Like, what is the thing we're not saying as we're sitting in this room talking about inclusion and impact? And what's the bravest kind of vision you have or call to action that you would like to share with us? Marla?
So the thing that feels the most urgent for me is the real challenge, and I think there's starting to be some funds that are addressing this. There's a real challenge about the day zero capital being available to entrepreneurs, especially to entrepreneurs of color, where that money typically comes from friends, family, close associated people who are willing to take the risk when there is no business, when it's just an idea and a smile and a PowerPoint deck if you're lucky. And again, sticking with this principle of using some practical example or some real world thing that happened to illustrate this, I was reading a profile of a very prominent person in the business world who I won't name this person, but although I could. And it was all about how this person built a gigantic real estate business. And I was really interested in this because at times I've dabbled in real estate, et cetera. And I got to the part of the article where the company got into trouble, and then the article went on to say he recapitalized the company by his billionaire uncle. And then I closed this magazine and went off and did something else. Because this article could have been encapsulated with one thing. The way to build a successful real estate business is to have a billionaire uncle, right? And so for those of us that do not have billionaire uncles or anything close to that, how are we going to be able to take these kinds of risks? How are we going to be able to get off the ground to be able to take that very, very first risk position? And the racial lens associated with that is a powerfully important component of it. It's hard for everyone. It is harder for looking at it through a racial lens. And that is a truth that I really want to hear, right? And I want to hear us figuring out ways to address it. I'm encouraged, again, because I do know of funds. There's an organization in Oakland. There's a lot going on where people are starting to talk about runways and that startup capital. And large organizations, Prudential included, working on trying to be creative about getting capital into funds that are willing to take that day zero risk on entrepreneurs of color. But that has been a massive gap, and it has contributed massively to the racial wealth gap. It has created its massive difference in terms of opportunity. That is, to me, the most important thing for us to really work on.
I love that. Call to action, day zero funding. Monika, how would you respond?
Well, I've lived in two worlds, the institutional world and then working very closely with the corporate world, trying to understand what their supplier needs are. And I love that I'm seeing a connectivity, and it's the ESG connectivity when public pension funds and large institutions are saying to corporations, we want you to be, conscious of your environment, conscious of your communities. And so there's all these concepts on corporate responsibility that are now touching on supplier diversity. And so I would love institutional investors to continue to have these questions and add to the corporations the question, tell me what you're doing on supplier diversity and tell me how you're really scaling and accelerating growth on a few of your companies. Because I think that when the CEO gets that question and he delegates that to his team, it gets done. It gets beautifully resolved. And so I think that elevating the conversation is always just going to yield better and better results. And I would say on the side of corporations, I always invite them to put 5 things on the burner, put 5 possible strategic outcomes. And we have a model that we share that is the SCD model, where we say, think about companies that you have today that you can scale. That's the S. Think about companies that are not diverse but are going to be changing ownership and that could, with minority capital and diverse entrepreneurs, turn into diverse enterprises. And those are intersections that happen every day in the market, where if we're on the know, then we can put together a $50, $100, $300 million capital raise and put the operating team to be able to convert into minorities. And then corporate America's every day shedding assets. All of a sudden it's not strategic, or they're in a merger, they need to sell some assets. All of those are phenomenal opportunities to team up with the right capital structure and the right operating teams and generate diverse enterprises. So we're always inviting corporations, put 5 things on the burner. And we're in a business where we look at 100 things, we zoom in 10, and we do 1. So there needs to be many things on the burner so that we really get to, make this a tsunami.
That's great.
Can I just add one thing to that? I just want to channel. There's a gentleman affiliated with the Aspen Institute. His name is Skip Battle, and so some people in the room will know Skip. One of the nuggets of takeaways that I got from Skip echoes, I think, exactly what you just said, which is you get what you inspect, not what you expect. And if we have CEOs believing that there will be an inspection of their suppliers and how diverse they are, their behavior will absolutely change, right? So,
All of a
great
sudden,
context.
key resources of the organization
Absolutely.
are devoted to that, and then it happens. Right?
No, absolutely.
Yes.
You, Lily, what about you? What's your brave call to action?
Yeah, I think something with the coronavirus outbreak reminded me of in Anand Gehirda's book, Winners Take All. He says we're only as strong as the least empowered people in our community. And so if you think about the workers who don't have enough money to go to the hospital, and those are the people who you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. And we can't continue to create a society or create companies where those workers are not empowered to take care of themselves, because that not only is bad for them, it's bad for all of us. And so really creating and empowering founders to build companies where they can pay their workers a living wage, and where they can not only hire people from diverse communities, but really empower them and create environments that are equitable for everyone and inclusive for everyone. And that's something for us at Kapor that we're really focused on now, is going into those communities. Like, we're really big in Oakland community, and making sure that those folks who have been in Oakland for years gain access to these high-paying jobs and are not brought on as contractors, but really creating an inclusive economy, so that we all benefit, and that tech doesn't just benefit like a small portion of the world.
No, that's awesome. You all are incredible. You're really on the front lines of making this question of inclusion real. So we are almost out of time, but I really just want to make sure that we recognize this team of super women up here. And so does anybody want to see the superpower pose again, superwoman pose again, before we stop?